There's a big move to work-life balance. So suggesting to your staff that they should stay and entertain clients until midnight with loads of alcohol and then write off their weekend with their family is just not acceptable, right? And that's what would generally happen. You'd be so groggy the next day, you may not even be able to enjoy your day off.
Welcome to the meeting room. I'm James Lancaster.
And I'm Paul Harvey.
Now, business events and alcohol. Have we got the mix right, or is it time to rethink what we're doing? In the studio with us today is Narmeen Kamran, founder of Desert Island Events and Temperance AF, and Laura Willoughby, founder of Club Soda, which is a social enterprise designed to encourage people to live well and drink more mindfully. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you.
Now, this is an interesting topic. I've sensed over the last 5 years in this country, maybe 10 years, a kind of shift in the attitude towards alcohol. There's obviously been a lot more good quality non-alcoholic drinks on the market. But sometimes the business events industry, you don't get the sense that it's following suit. But before we get into all of that, I'd just like to hear a bit about your own stories and how you came to be doing what you do. So, Laura, should we start with you? How did you get to become founder of Club Soda?
We're 10 years old in January, so I've been doing this for 10 years. And actually, we started off as being like a Weight Watchers, but with booze, because I gave up drinking and I realised that there wasn't anything that helped people while they were still working, living busy lives, to cut down or go alcohol free in a way that suited that lifestyle. So that's where we started. But I have a secret, which is that I've got a politics background and really I'm a campaigner by nature. So quite quickly people started to moan about the lack of alcohol-free drinks when they went out to the pub or bar. So we did a big piece of research on this and found that there was a lack of choice, no inspiring drinks. And unbeknown to me, not long after, those sort of drinks started to appear. So Seedlip came on the market, Heineken Zero launched in 2017. So more and more over the years, we've leaned into becoming experts in alcohol-free drinks and why you might want to stock them. And we've done 10 mindful drinking festivals, and we now have an alcohol-free shop and bar in Covent Garden, which is designed both for the consumer and the trade to come and try before they buy.
Narmeen, what's your story?
I started Desert Island Events originally as a podcast during COVID. I've worked in events since I was 16, but I found like a little gap during COVID when everyone was talking virtual. So I wanted to say, events aren't dead. Let's just have a fun little conversation. And then off the back of that, I started getting more work because events started opening up again. So I then turned it into an agency. So I've been doing that for a couple of years now. And shortly after I started, I realised I didn't really want to drink anymore, and it was mostly actually to do with our industry. So I wasn't actually drinking much like with friends or on the weekends. It was actually when our industry opened up back in like summer of 2021, suddenly there was like events, multiple events every week. And it just became so difficult because it'll be a Tuesday night and I don't know how many times someone's topped up my glass. I don't know how many drinks I've had. And that kind of made me think, okay, well, I want to start focusing on business. So maybe I'm going to cut the alcohol. So I quit drinking the day before the M&IT Agency Challenge in 2021. I know. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I'm going to an event. And actually, because the agency challenge is a much smaller event. So I was like, okay, this is going to be like a real tough one for me to like, how do I get through all this networking? And luckily the venue were quite good. They had some like more premium soft drinks. And then since then, I've not drunk since. I've managed to get through a lot of events sober. But then I've realised actually they're a bit terrible in terms of options for people that don't drink. And it was my own experience that led me to be like, okay, something needs to change. So I started becoming more and more vocal about it. Laura and I have spoken on many, many different event trade shows, all about making events more inclusive. And then I saw a gap in the market. And actually, I have a background in bars and hospitality. So I started Temperance earlier this year as a alcohol-free bar service for events.
So Laura, just to clarify, how long have you not been drinking for?
I'm 12 years alcohol free. Most of my team still drink. They're all moderate drinkers. And most of our customers in the shop are also moderate drinkers. And I think that's the important thing about what's happening now. This isn't about everybody going sober. This is about the fact that moderation has gone mainstream and people are still looking to go out. I think that's a really important thing, but they don't want to always drink, and they've got different tactics for doing that. And alcohol-free drinks really, really support them in that.
Why has this shift happened? Is it a generational thing? Is it a cultural thing?
It's cross-generational, but different motivations in different age groups. So younger people are drinking less altogether. So 35% of 18 to 25-year-olds say that they're alcohol-free. But even then, younger people drink less drinks in an evening, are more likely to be moderate because they've learned that alcohol and anxiety don't mix very well. Whereas I'm the ladette generation. We were taught that if you had anxiety, you should drink. But we're all going through menopause right now, so we're cutting down. And then if you add into that type 2 diabetes and general, definitely a post-COVID boost in people wanting to be healthier, then that's why this trend is emerging. And it's not just the UK, it's global, but I think the shift in the UK was far more noticeable than anywhere else. And a lot of brands launched here before they've launched anywhere else.
Cost got anything to do with it?
Yeah, but alcohol-free is not cheaper. If you remember that the alcohol in your alcoholic drink is the free bit of your drink, we tend to overvalue alcohol, but actually it's free. It's the natural part of the process that the drink goes through. So actually to take alcohol out and to add the extra ingredients in, you need to create flavour, because alcohol is also a flavour enhancer. It can actually cost more to make an alcohol-free drink than an alcoholic drink. But yes, money is a motivator for people cutting down. Mental health, overall healthy living, and all sorts of stuff around mindfulness, and all of those things all play into that general mood. When I first started Club Soda, people would say, well, I'm cutting down drinking in order to lose weight, because that was seen to be the acceptable reason to be taking a break from drinking. Now people are far more open with the reasons why that they are, and they're many and varied, but we've obviously got different generations have got a different relationship with alcohol, and so some definitely prefer an alcohol-free alternative to the alcohol they're used to drinking, whereas other people are interested in the new things on the market like the Petivo or the 3 Spirit.
So just you've got a retail shop that's part of Club Soda. You also facilitate events. You go out and
Yeah, our goal is to, anywhere where alcohol's sold, is to make sure that there's a good choice and range of drinks available that aren't alcohol, basically. So we're working with the Live Awards this year to make sure there's good alcohol-free available. If Narmeen calls me up and says there's an event, they need some drinks. But the most important thing is we don't arrange for the brands to come and show and tell by providing free product. Otherwise, all we're doing is subsidising the alcohol, and nobody learns anything about the shifting habits. So, and often in the events industry, people use, well, there's no extra budget as an excuse. But of course, you've got a drinks budget. A third of it just needs to be alcohol-free now. And the better quality alcohol-free you have, the more people will drink it. And it's giving people the option to pace the evening in their own way, rather than assuming that everybody just wants a constant glass of sparkling wine continually topped up through the evening. It's a bad assumption to make these days.
It is. It's interesting what you were saying about the sort of mental health side of this. I was speaking to somebody and they were saying that the older they get, the more they realise that it's one or two things. They either just give up the events industry full stop, or they seriously look at how much they're drinking at these events, because it does just flow quite freely, doesn't it, the alcohol, and it's free for starters. So do you think we need a sort of a total maybe flip this on its head and say actually the norm should be maybe one or two drinks, and if you want any more, it's a paid for bar? Or do you think we've got this whole thing the wrong way around?
I think so, because if you think about in terms of like business events, why is there alcohol there? Because obviously going through my own journey, I've started to like look at having a different perspective, and now thinking about networking events. Like, yes, maybe some people would love a drink, 1, 2 is great, but actually if the purpose of your event is to connect businesses, to actually get work done, to make meaningful connections, and to say that can't happen without alcohol, then I think that's something really wrong in our industry, to be like, oh, we can only do business with alcohol. And actually we should rip up that rule book and like start again and look, how do we make those meaningful connections? How do we network in a better way, rather than having loads of drinks and then, you don't remember people's name, you might not know. to say like business is done over drinks. Well, actually, it doesn't have to be alcohol. You can have a meaningful conversation with an alcohol-free drink, and actually that you would make better connections that way.
I think there are 3 other drivers in business that are worth considering. First, there's a big move to work-life balance. So suggesting to your staff that they should stay and entertain clients until midnight with loads of alcohol and then write off their weekend with their family is just not acceptable, right? And that's what would generally happen. You'd be so groggy the next day, you may not even be able to enjoy your day off. And so people are more likely to want to go home straight after work and participate in their own things. The second is around sexual harassment. Now, the whole of the law sector has changed the way it's done things because the International Bar Association found in 2019 that most sexual harassment happened at events where alcohol was present. And of course, other evidence bears that out. Sexual harassment is more likely to happen when an event is out of the workplace and with alcohol involved. So there's a real big shift in that, and it's why Lloyd's of London again also made that shift in their policy. And then the final is around diversity. It's not suiting a diverse workforce if you put every single event through a lens of alcohol, and you've got not only staff who don't drink but staff who may be pregnant, staff who are running marathons and doing big triathlons, you've got younger trainees, and to assume that they're all drinking and drinking is the only thing they want to do is really important. So those 3 elements alone, let alone the fact that it's just good practice to make sure that everybody has an equal experience at an event and that you're not treating somebody differently just because they're not drinking, is also a key part of that. You know, when I first started Club Soda, you could go to an event in some of the big businesses in the City of London. If you weren't drinking, your alcohol-free option was a Fanta. You know,
there is that. There's that Coca-Cola, Fanta,
yeah,
children's drinks. Basically.
I mean, that others you in the room for a start, and it's not the same serve. It's not an equality of serve. But there's a big shift to go towards getting event organisers and caterers into a mindset where they think about the whole and not just that it's really easy to serve a load of beer and a load of wine, and that it's they might have to think a little bit harder around the rest.
I was going to ask about this. So who do you think should be taking a lead? Is it employers or organisers or the venues themselves?
It's everybody. I mean, if you want systems change, everybody's got to do their bit, right? And if a load of lawyers can't get their catering contract changed, then we've got no hope, right? So caterers do, and there's some really good ones. Bartlett Mitchell in the city does they always make sure there's good alcohol free alongside everything in theirs, and they do a lot of the in-house catering for places. I've really been impressed with what they do. If you're organising your Christmas party for your company, I can tell you lots of organisers do phone up and ask a venue in advance. So Mr. Fogg's Emporium, they've got loads of Mr. Fogg's all across London, and they're the same company run Cahoots. 40% of their menu's alcohol free, and they say at Christmas every question they get is about do you have a good selection of alcohol free? Do you have some gluten free options? Do you have vegan options? Because you're catering for a group, right? You need to make sure everybody's included. So the event organisers have a big role in doing that. And remembering it's not just for sober people. The more good alcohol-free options you give, the more people will pick them, the less drunk they're going to get over the evening, the less likely they are to need the emergency services in the middle of Liverpool Street Station on the weekend before Christmas. So all in all, it's important also for your team's health and wellness as well.
Whenever I'm booking events for clients, I'll always advise my clients, okay, well, in terms of drinks, we need to have a decent split of non-alcoholic and alcoholic. If we can ask, how many people, that would be great. Otherwise, like you said, people choose to moderate. And I think there's a growing trend of now people, even when they do drink, they would rather save it for special occasions or when they're with their family and, more meaningful occasions rather than a work event, a networking event, an industry event. So that's where there's sort of a shift where people are choosing, we don't want to drink there. But now, anytime I'm making bookings, like I won't book a venue or a caterer if they can't adapt or if they don't have good non-alcoholic options, because that just says to me you're only catering for like this one standard traditional crowd, but you're not actually catering for the 21st century. And diversity is such a huge point as well, because I've been calling it sober inclusion, and it is actually also a part of sustainability. A lot of the time we forget sustainability is about the 3 Ps. It's not just about the planet and all the green initiatives we do regarding the planet. It's also about people and profit. And actually, if you're doing so much stuff in terms of, oh, look, we've got really sustainable X, Y, and Z in terms of drinks, but we're not doing anything to actually look after the person that's drinking them in terms of giving them non-alcoholic options, then that's a problem right there. And again, like you were saying about diversity, it's not just about people who are religious, who are pregnant. People can choose just not to drink. They might be doing it for health reasons. So inclusion is, a part of making sure everybody, no matter what their dietary requirements are included. Like, you wouldn't turn away a vegan from an event just because you don't want to provide them a vegan option. And then the other thing you touched upon, Laura, was the sexual harassment. And I think that's really important, especially recently within the news and the media the last few years. I can't speak for men, but I know as a woman, going home late at night after an event, you don't want to be putting yourself in those situations. And I know a lot more people who are choosing just not to drink because of their own safety.
So women wanting to remain alert.
And men wanting to be alert, not being an idiot at an event. So it's both of those things.
Absolutely. I was wondering, when we're talking about business events and the networking component of business events, is it just easier from an event planner's point of view, do you think? Is there a laziness here that says if people are going to get slightly merry and tipsy on alcohol, all we have to do is provide a room and an open bar? So that's the easy bit of the conference sorted. If we're going to be more sober in our networking, does the creativity have to go up? Do you have to create something a bit different? Is it more work? And is that part of the resistance maybe?
I think a little bit, only because a lot of the time when you're throwing these sort of networking events, there's such a focus on the alcohol. You don't consider anything else. Sure, you might throw in maybe some food or a photo booth or whatnot, but when you're doing a networking event, a business event, a lot of times organisers will just think, just make sure there's enough alcohol and everyone will keep themselves happy. And it is actually quite a lazy sort of approach. It's one of those copy and paste. There's no innovation. It's just basically going through the template of what has always been done, rather than now actually thinking about your guests. And I think that's one of the most important things that a lot of people forget, is that we're in the business of events, and that is the business of people. And we always forget about the people behind, who this event is for. You need to think about the customers, the guests, the clients, and not just, oh, it's really easy, just make sure there's a lot of alcohol and the event will take care of itself. Well, actually, that's going to cause more problems. Surely, if you're going to be more non-alcoholic, you want to have some more meaningful things there. People might not have what they call the liquid confidence. Have something to be okay, some icebreakers, some openings, maybe introduce people to different people if they're on their own. And I think, there are creative ways that you can do that, and everyone can still enjoy themselves by having an alcohol-free drink. One of the other things I find at events is if there is alcohol-free and there's alcohol, the alcohol-free is normally in an awful glass. It singles you out. And
you have to go find it yourself.
Yeah, one of my favourites has been going to an event. I'm not going to name any names here because I've been to so many different events, and some of them where I've gone and they've said, champagne reception, okay, great, do you have anything non-alcoholic? And they're go to the bar, and I go to the bar and it's no, you have to pay £2 for a can of water. And I'm okay, so my options are drink alcohol or pay for water. And I think organisers aren't clearly thinking here, again, surely this is something you think about. Or there's a champagne reception, go to the bar, we've got non-alcoholic. But again, you're not giving that the same experience. You wouldn't tell a vegan, oh, go over to the kitchen and find your own food, or anyone with a dietary requirement, go over there, find your own food. You know, all of the food comes out, it's separated out, you know, the allergens, but we should be doing that same for drinks receptions. Similarly, when you've got drinks on a bar, have it all there so people can choose. I remember going to an industry event a couple of years ago off the back of all of my chatting online about making events more inclusive when it comes to drinks. And they had, and it was an afternoon awards ceremony, and they actually had a non-alcoholic option, albeit it was a sparkling elderflower, but it was there. And it was there on trays. Well, I mean, look at what we've got in front of us. Yeah.
There are more options available, and it needs to be more than one thing. If you've got a beer, a wine, then you need to have an alcohol-free beer, an alcohol-free wine alternative. So you need, you know, diversity of choice as well.
Yeah, and they had the non-alcoholic option and an alcoholic option on trays on arrival, and I would say about 2/3 nearly chose alcohol-free. And that just goes to show you.
Always doing head counts. I'm sure you are.
Really?
Yeah.
Was that an evening event? Or
no, it was an afternoon event, and they chose to have the non-alcoholic option on arrival rather than go find it yourself. And because of that, just because it is there, it is easy and available as the alcohol is, more people opted for the alcohol-free.
Did you notice if they went onto the alcohol during the event?
Yeah, people would go on to alcohol later.
They're pacing themselves, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Like, why
bookending, zebra striping, I can explain all of those for you if you like. So it's that important thing that most people's moderation tactics are taking days off or reducing the amount they drink during a set occasion, or bookending. So they'll start with an alcohol-free and they'll end the evening with an alcohol-free, so they can still stay longer. And I think there's a lot to learn from the hospitality industry here. So 1 in 3 visits to the pub are now alcohol-free, so that's quite a lot. And that's because, you know, people don't drink during a weekday lunchtime like they used to. So they'll go and have a pub lunch, but they won't have alcohol with it. They'll have something else. But what's happening more and more is what we may have done when we were younger, which was vertical drinking, which is standing in a bar with a drink. That was a good night out then. That's not a good night out anymore. You've got to have an experience. I mean, you can see that. I mean, we're paying to play darts, for Christ's sake. You know, who paid to play darts in my life?
Get on board with that.
But you know, but people are paying to go out somewhere that offers them maybe some games, some really good food, a really good atmosphere, maybe a theme. And so therefore, alcohol is no longer the star of the show. It's part of the experience. And so the events industry can't lean on alcohol being the experience anymore. They need to think about everything else of that evening. And, you know, we need to get rid of some of those lazy ways of doing things. Another really good example is if you ever go to an awards dinner, they're always catered for on 3-course meal and half a bottle of wine per person. And if you're not drinking, you normally have to go to a different bar and buy your own drink. And that's not acceptable. It's not a healthy way to run an event either. So you know, but it's been always done that way. So we need to rip up those forms that people use for booking and rewrite them.
And it should become a standard as like dietary requirements. You know, we can obviously have. I mean,
I always put it as a dietary requirement, but then my bottle of alcohol-free wine gets kept somewhere separate, whereas it needs to be on the table for everyone to pick. Yeah. So whereas a dietary requirement is quite specific to a person, unless you want to make sure there's a good half and half of food, which often happens a lot now. But actually, it just what you need to go. Whenever I'm serving alcohol, I have to assume that 1/3 of the people coming won't drink. And they definitely won't drink if I've given them a really good alcohol-free alternative.
Yeah. For me, there should 100% just be there as standard. But at the moment, we kind of need that data to make our point. So to say, especially if you've got a client or a caterer that isn't as on it as they should be, to say, okay, look, here are our dietary requirements in terms of food. Also, this percentage do not drink. Therefore, we want a percentage higher than that is non-alcoholic to cover for those who have said and those who on the night are going to choose to moderate. Because, you know, you can't, sometimes you might think 1/3, but sometimes it might be more than 1/3. And this is just me being an event planner. Like, I need to know, like, the data set. I need to know.
We're drinking non-alcoholic beer
that Laura has very kindly brought in.
Well, I thought I'd bring you some things because sometimes people think an alcohol-free drink is just a soft drink dressed up in a different bottle, and that's not the case, which is why we both went to elderflower as the option. And alcohol-free beers, I think everyone now totally accepts that alcohol-free beer finally tastes great, and people really like it. So we've got a mood-enhancing beer here, which is New Wave.
This
Big
is what
Drop
I'm drinking,
Citra,
yeah?
and Lucky Saint. New Wave is a mood-enhancing beer. It's got botanicals in it that will elevate your mood. So for an evening event, for example, perfect. We're taking that to the Live Awards this year. So.
Are you feeling elevated, James? How is it going?
I
You
am.
might need a little bit more.
The interesting thing about non-alcoholic beer, craft beer particularly, is that if you start the evening on it, you really can't tell the difference. This is bookending thing, isn't it? If you start with an alcoholic and then go to a non-alcoholic, you do notice it.
Yeah, some people zebra stripes. They alternate an alcoholic and alcohol-free
I think
beer.
I'm a zebra striper.
Yes, that's zebra striping. And then some people bookend, which is they start with an alcohol-free, decide whether this is an occasion they wouldn't mind drinking at or not. And then in order to extend their stay, rather than go home early because they don't want to drink anymore, they'll move back to an alcohol-free.
But the point is, it tastes grown up. And this is why, I want to drink it, because you don't have that horrible feeling of sort of here's a water or here's a Fanta or here's a Coke, where you're automatically made to feel like a child.
Yeah, and actually this is one of my biggest pet peeves. I remember going to a international trade show, and one of our destinations was hosting a drinks reception, and I went up and I was like, do you have anything alcohol free? And the poor girl behind the bar was so excited on the stand. She was like, oh my God, yes. And she brought out some sparkling water and some juice. And I, to be fair, at that point, I'd kind of had it, and not in a rude way.
At every event.
No. I know. I didn't say it in a rude way. I was like, I'm really sorry, but I'm not in the mood for a breakfast drink. Because to me, a juice, that's for breakfast.
It's not breakfast. It's not 1980.
Yeah. And the other thing with a fizzy drink, a soda, for me, that's just being a teenager or a child when your parents would only let you have one on the weekend as a treat. And it's no, I'm a grown up. I want to drink something grown up. And, having drunk previously, I love my wines. I love some spirits. I love some sparkling, and you can still have such a great experience. I've got wines. We've got one of my favourite sparklings on the table here right now.
What's that?
Naughty. It's a sparkling Chardonnay. Those are fantastic drinks, and it makes me feel like I am included and part of the event. When everyone's drinking out of a nice stemware, why do I get a cold tumbler? And it just doesn't feel right. Whereas with this, everyone feels the same, everyone feels included, and you feel like an adult. You're not being othered, you're not being sidelined, and that was the whole part of why I call it sober inclusion.
So you went sober primarily for business reasons. You're starting businesses, you want to keep a clear head and you wanted to focus. Are you sober full stop now in terms of socials? And how has that changed your life?
I feel like I've got life back, strangely. So for me, it was only really when I was drinking at industry events. I mean, summer of 2021 is a big hazy memory from back-to-back industry events. And then coming onto this, I was like, I really don't want to spend my days hungover. I am a little bit into fitness. I did want to, do things with my day, and realizing I'm wasting time, not sleeping enough. My skin's horrible. I feel bloated. So when I decided to quit, I didn't actually put a time limit on it. I didn't say I'm going to do this for a month. I'm going to do this for a year. I'm going to do this forever. And actually that kind of took a lot of the pressure off it. So I just took it day by day. And actually, here we are over 3 years later.
Wow, 3 years.
3 years, 1 month and 1 day.
You just stopped and there's no...
Yeah, just stopped. Okay. And actually now I feel so much better. I've got a clear head. I've got energy. I don't, and I actually feel so much better, health-wise as well. My skin feels great. There are so many different benefits I didn't know that would come from quitting. And actually, it's been a game changer for me.
I wanted to ask as well, did it change your experience of the events themselves, presumably? Because, for example, the M&IT Awards this year, I stayed sober because I wasn't feeling that well. And we had a good array of alcohol-free options on the table, which was very good. But I didn't really notice a difference until the end of the night when I was talking to people, and I was like, they're not making sense.
Yeah.
It's like, oh,
God,
right,
I never noticed before.
Or when they repeat the same story about 4 times. Yeah. Going sober as well meant I had a lot of self-reflection and understanding who I was as a person and what I liked and what I didn't like. Turns out dancing on tables wasn't a drunk thing. I'd still do that sober, but I started to understand what I like about events. Not having to be the last person on the dance floor. I could still be, depending on the event.
I've seen pictures.
Yeah. Guilty. But also, finding more meaningful time, because I remember 10 years ago coming out of uni, first jobs in London, everyone's like always drinking after work, this, that and the other, and now it's more intentional, like who I'm spending time with, events, actually having proper conversations with people and getting to know them better, making better business connections rather than, as you say, a load of waffle, which I was probably guilty of quite a lot. So for me now, I think I've learned like I can still enjoy events, and it's what I find that I can take out of it, because my experience now being sober, I can form better connections.
Is that the same with you, Laura? Do you
Without a doubt,
experience events differently now?
Yeah, without a doubt, it takes some practice to go to events alcohol-free when you've used to been always having a drink. So if anyone's thinking about doing it, give it some time. You might feel a bit weird and awkward at the first one, but I love being the person now that I'm a good connector person. So I love talking to as many people in the room and then being able to connect the people in the room together. It feels like a superpower, and it gives me so much joy. And I love also going into just random groups of people and just introducing myself. I'm aware that that's not the same for everyone, but it's amazing how much more meaningful those connections are when you make them without alcohol in your system. And then, as Narmeen says, you can give up drinking or change your drinking habits for many reasons. Productivity is a pretty good one, I can tell you. It is like a productivity shot. So it's definitely worth thinking about. And for anyone here, you don't have to go sober, but do try a few events alcohol-free and see how you feel, and think about how you might get more out of those events if you were there at the early part of the evening before everyone else has had a few drinks, and made the most of all of those connections in the room, and learnt that, I think it's one of the terrible things about British society is we've been taught to be in new situations and connect with people. We've been taught all this time that that's something to be done when you're half drunk, when actually, you get more out of it when you're not.
Is that because people are terrified of networking, though? I mean, this is going back to the original problem, aren't we? If you
they either
stick a
hate
load of people in
networking
a
and
room,
feel they're there under duress,
yes,
right? Or they're terrified. And
Yeah.
I actually think rather than always leaning on alcohol, it's worth taking the time to work out about not being terrified, and to think about those opening questions that you'll always have when you go into a room, looking in advance at the people who are going, and making that event worth your time. Because actually, if you're going to spend your quality spare time, which is basically what it is, at an event, then you need to make that event work for you. And if we recognise that nearly everybody's anxious about meeting new people in a room, and to feel the fear and do it anyway, right, and just to go in there, then you can do it without alcohol. But it does take a bit of practice. And so, yes, the first time you do it, it might feel awkward. You might feel a bit strange doing an event for the first time without alcohol in your hand. But give it a few more, and you will begin to not notice, and it will begin to transform.
And actually, it just genuinely got easier and easier for me. And as someone who previously had like anxiety, depression, I resolved that way before I quit drinking. But actually, I became more confident as a person. I was definitely anxious, the M&IT agency challenge, first one, don't have any support, don't know anyone there. And actually, I sort of eased into it. I went to a couple more events, and actually it made me realise okay, I can still enjoy meeting people and talking to people and actually getting my confidence to actually be who I am. And I think, especially when you've just started out, there is a lot of anxiety around that. Will I fit in? Will people still want to talk to me? Am I going to have 101 questions about why I'm not drinking?
We also make the assumption that everybody in the room is drinking. And when you're drinking, you never notice that some people have been nursing the same glass of wine and always saying no to a top up. And so the fact that we've been in this societal situation where people hide the fact that they are not drinking as much means that you normalise drinking. That means other people have permission to overdrink. And so we end up in this ridiculous cauldron of stuff. And actually, my goal is that we end up with a society where drinking isn't felt like it's compulsory, which means that, for a lot of us, we might not have got into such a pickle with alcohol as we did. And that would be a great thing, and that people feel that they've got the choice and they don't have to hide that.
And I think that's the one thing at the moment. The industry seems like if you want to go to an industry event, drinking does feel a little compulsory. And I want to make people know, like, it really isn't. And it starts with us, providing better options, making people understand, like, there is more to drink out there than alcohol, orange juice or sparkling elderflower.
It's interesting, though, isn't it? Because people who do drink, and I count myself in that number, can get a bit kind of prickly about this subject, feel a bit defensive, get their haunches up. This is part of who I am, this is part of my culture. You're telling me what to do, you're being didactic,
and
that kind
this
of
is
thing.
the other thing I find that sometimes when I tell people I don't drink, sometimes they start to bring up their own drinking habits and try to justify like how much they drink, and I'm like, I genuinely do not care. Like, to each their own. Like, I'm not going to be like, oh, you should be going sober. Like, sure, if you want to talk to me about some great non-alcoholic options, I'll chat to you. But choosing to drink or not is like a very personal choice for some people, and I genuinely do not care if you drink, don't drink. But I feel like when you do tell some people that you don't drink, they suddenly start to bring up their own drinking habits and try to justify like whether they're not an alcoholic, and I'm like, there are so many other things we could be talking about.
Yeah, and I think a lot's changed in the last 5 years. The City of London used to fund some of our work, and when I used to go to the licensing committee dinner, which I'm going to again shortly, the older male common councilman used to just, laugh at me a little bit. And now I can't stop them telling me about the fact they've taken 6 months off drinking and they found this great alcohol-free beer and they've cut down a bit and all of those things. So it has shifted a lot. But I think, do you think we've told you to go sober today?
No, not at all.
So that's a good start.
Let's just talk about this, what I'm drinking.
So you've currently got Naughty, which is probably one of the better available alcohol-free sparkling wines. So
it's delicious.
Yes.
It's
just to say, it is all about occasion, right? So when you're looking for drinks for your event, pick by occasion. If you're serving wine, then make sure you serve alcohol-free wine. If you're serving a drink like sparkling wine on arrival, make sure exactly that you've got a tray that's marked alcohol-free, and that everyone gets that same experience on arrival. And then you've got here things like Petivo, which actually does do very well in a jug format, by the way. So it's using apple cider vinegar at its base. It's absolutely superb. Or 3 Spirit, which is a mood-enhancing spirit that you can make into cocktails or just serve with a tonic. And so if you're serving cocktails or spirits, there are alternatives. And none of these are kids' drinks. They all suit the occasion. They all have what I call speed humps in them, which are, tastes and flavours that slow you down so that you're not chugging it back like a soft drink. And people can stand there and have this drink in an elegant glass and feel like they're an equal part of the occasion.
I was going to say, this alcohol-free wine that we've got here, can I try some of that?
Yes, you can. Let me
the red
just
one.
grab that for you.
I've had alcohol-free fizz before. That was delicious, and beer. I don't think I've had alcohol-free wine, so I'm really interested to see how that works. And also, I think I saw on the Club Soda website that like wine is one of the drinks that people find it hardest to give up.
Wine's a 15% ABV drop, but the reason why wine's quite difficult is that it's still, and even if you've got a dry wine, it's still quite sweet, and it's high in volume. So most of the wines you get now 14-15%, and so it's really easy to drink quickly. You're likely to have a bottle rather than it served by the glass, and you may have a bottle, drink a bottle at home and always finish the bottle. And you're always topped up at an event, so it's really hard. And therefore, your tolerance for alcohol increases quite quickly. And so therefore, you need more wine to get the same amount of drunk. And so it becomes this spiral. And there's a whole, we're the wine generation in this room. The younger people aren't as interested in wine, but wine became affordable sort of in the early 90s and in the supermarket. Our socialising changed to be more mixed gendered and couple sharing drinks at home. Wine became a big part of that, but it's actually a really easy drink. So two glasses of wine on an evening is binge drinking technically as well. And so we all binge drink on a regular basis.
2 glasses is binge drinking, wow.
And it's high strength and really, really easy to drink. At least bubbles give you some resistance and slows you down a bit. So so that's why it's very difficult and becomes a problematic drink, but it also becomes the drink our generation are looking for to create alcohol free. And because it's a 15% ABV drop, it is a lot harder. But I mean, I've not drunk alcoholic wine for ages. The new wine's coming through. So what you've got there is a Moderato wine. It's a French wine with French grapes using a brand new technique in dealcoholization. So really high quality wine. You will taste the difference, but it's still the right drink to go with food.
Yeah. I mean, it's a delicious drink.
It's a good drink in its
really
own right.
Smooth.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have that kind of like, kind of sometimes when you drink bad wine,
yes,
that kind of
that vinegary astringency at the back.
You know you're going to get a headache.
Yeah. That would go perfectly with food, right? And if you had that in the evening, you would feel fully included in the occasion, and it goes with the food, and it's a good drink in its own right.
And it goes to show, like, why are you drinking in the first place? Because if you can have a very good sparkling, if you can have a very good wine, why do you need the alcohol? And that's, for me, it's like, why do you need the alcohol? Which is why I can have the exact same experience. And when you were touching upon earlier, if you're having wine at an event, you should have alcohol-free wine. I think very, very much believe in matched drinking, because then it gives everyone the opportunity to have an equal level of experience. So anything that you are serving, make sure you have the option is alcoholic or non-alcoholic. If you're doing wine, alcoholic, non-alcoholic, beers, same with spirits, cocktails, just make sure that everyone has an option. And I think that's a really good way to be moving forward, is making the alcohol sort of the optional part and actually the drink being the main focus.
How far away from that scenario do you think we are?
I feel like we have been making progress. In the 3 years since I've been talking about this, there's definitely been some change. I remember very early on, sort of maybe like a year in, I had contacted a caterer about an event I had for a client. And I said, hi, my name is, and they were like, we know who you are. And I'm like, oh, do you? And they were like, yeah. We've seen the stuff you've been posting online, LinkedIn, and we've actually added non-alcoholic wine to our menus because of what you've done. And I was like, okay, so we are I felt like that was such a big win. And I think, it is going more and more. I don't know if anyone's seen the news recently, like Soho House has launched an entire alcohol-free menu across all of their brands. And the advert they've got out for it is amazing as well. And you can see people are really, really driving forward. So I think a lot of venues are going for it, but there is still a long way to go, because you do have a lot of like the traditional people who are like venues, caterers, event planners.
It's some of the older hotels, isn't it, that have not quite got there yet. And also a lot of places, it's the in-house caterers that do the events and the catering, and they're all on a contract, and they won't do anything outside their contract until they need to. And so I think once those contract renewals start coming through and alcohol-free becomes part of the pitch, just like, the healthy eating became part of the pitch probably about 10 years ago, I think that may begin to shift it as well.
And actually, sometimes you'll realise they'll only do it for certain clients. There was a venue I remember Laura had messaged me about, and I'd previously gone on the site visit with them and a very well-known client, and they were like, yeah, we'll do alcohol-free, because I was very much, we will need to have, like, if we do inclusive events here, and I remember 6-7 months later you'd message me being about this venue and struggling to get alcohol free. I was like, that's interesting, because they were willing to do it for me and the client I had.
It's often not consistent. The BFI do lovely drinks when they do their sponsors events for films, but it drops, and their bars are great, but when they do their members events, which are small little drinks after the film, it doesn't translate through to there. So we don't always have it all the way through the DNA of the organisation or the events.
But clearly the client has a big role to play here in actually discovering for themselves what their stakeholders, their members, their customers want, right? So if they don't have that information, they can't pass it on.
Yeah, and I think that's why like data is so important. Like you can't change what you can't see.
But I think, we do know lots of data about people changing drinking habits. So this shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that more and more people are drinking less. And I think the research that we've done, Narmeen, together shows some of that as well. So there's enough data out there, including in the sales of alcohol-free and people talking about it, to give you a sense that something has shifted and you really need to have something there. You might need a little while to get the proportions right if you're having a mixed menu, but to you don't need data now to know that you need to have choice.
Well, something has shifted, I think, in the attitude towards drink, not just in this country, but as you said, further afield. But thank you both very, very much for coming in here and sharing your experiences and your expertise.
And now we get to have a party, right?
And now
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much for being on the meeting room. Cheers.
Thanks you so much.